And hello to hello to this week's lesson. Tuesday evening, we're carrying on with Peace in the World article from Baal HaSulam. Today we're going to start off, or we're going to carry on actually, from the subtitle In Practical Life, the 4 attributes contradict one another. Now let's do a little introduction to this video. This article. Baal HaSulam wrote this article pretty much maybe 80, maybe 100 years ago. And it talks about society. Now you might wonder why a Kabbalist would write about society and societal structure. He writes about the society and humanity often because humanity is the level in creation that needs to attain the highest degree in creation. Having said that, it's also the most harm-doing, the most harmful layer in creation. So Baal HaSulam wants to write and tell us how society's structure, how society's well-being and actually ill-being as well is determined in the interaction between people. Because the whole of creation and the whole of reality is interconnected and integral. Baal HaSulam wants to give us the perspective and bring us to realization that humanity being at the top of the food chain, the most developed on the one hand, and on the other hand the most harmful in creation, needs to change itself and bring itself to a higher level of consciousness, being a level of consciousness that's integrated to the laws of nature. So accordingly what we have to do is to adapt ourselves in such a way in society with respect to our relationships between each other, and also with our attitude towards the whole of nature, so that we can come to this higher level. And this is done, he says, by organizing society. So before he tells us how to organize society, he gives us in this article the perspective of how society is set up, why we need to live in society, how do we need to live in society, what we have done throughout history to maintain society, and what changes we had to do in society to renew ourselves, because the current state was basically giving us suffering and misery. So humanity being, humanity having gone through a bunch of phases, several phases, revolutions in developing its societal structure, is still at a loss. So in the 21st century we still don't understand how we need to build our society in a correct way, so that our life for the whole of humanity can be and should be good. So this article it's actually more than an introduction, because he gives us the aspects and the points that humanity from within itself came up with, such as the attributes of truth, mercy, justice, and peace. These attributes humanity kind of had to implement with its own mentality, because we couldn't understand the balance of nature. We couldn't understand how to balance ourselves within society and also within nature. So this lack of balance obviously pushed us to develop all kinds of systems and ideologies and perspectives so that we could complete this lack. So what we have to do here is to really try to understand Baal HaSulam when he says how all of us in reality, in human society, are like little cogwheels in a machine, and we're all connected to each other. So if one cogwheel breaks down, the whole machine starts to give all kinds of errors, and it starts to malfunction and starts causing harm to everything. So an individual also in society, as he mentions earlier on in the article, is actually measured by how much harm he does to society, or how much good he does to society. And according to that harm and to that good that he does, he also benefits from that within society. So this integrality of society for us needs to be understood by this phase of the article already, and why humanity had to come up with all kinds of ideologies and principles in order to reconcile this lack of understanding about what is true and what is just. So let's carry on with the article, and we'll carry on with the subtitle, In Practical Life, the 4 attributes contradict one another. So these 4 attributes are truth, mercy, justice, and peace. So humanity couldn't reconcile these. And in order for that to happen, it needs to be understood. So why we can't seem to approach things in a truthful way, in a just way, why there can't be peace. So how we try to constantly complement things in order to balance things out, but we failed all the time. So let's take a look at these 4 attributes and how they contradict each other, and due to these contradictions we still have a very unpleasant life on earth as human society, as also the world is showing us now with the coronavirus. And before the coronavirus, think about it, there were all kinds of conflicts. Depression was up 40% in human society. So we were already going through all kinds of terrorism, regional conflicts, natural disasters. We were already being squeezed up by life from all over, you know, family breakdowns, everybody's in depression, you know, half the world is hungry despite the fact that we've got food. So all these things are really, all these things from all sides, we were already being squeezed. So all of a sudden this coronavirus was a wake-up call for humanity that was actually necessary. It was actually good that we got it, because otherwise there might have been a world war. So this coronavirus gave humanity the opportunity to stop, think, and reevaluate how we're living. So let's see how this article is still relevant to us. Really, it's as if he wrote this article 100 years ago for this day. So let's really make use of this. Baal Islam gives us a lot of insight about human society and how we need to correct it, how we need to arrange it so that we can have a peaceful life. So the heading, In Practical Life, the 4 attributes contradict one another. If the above practical difficulties which disturb us, helpless people on our way, are not enough, we have, in addition, a further mix-up and great battle of the psychological predispositions, meaning the attributes themselves within each and every one of us individually, which are unique and contradictory to one another. For the 4 above attributes, mercy, truth, justice, and peace, which were divided in nature, which were divided in the nature of people, whether by development or by rearing, are in and of themselves contradictory to one another. If we take, for example, the attribute of mercy in its abstract form, we find that its government contradicts all other attributes, meaning that by the laws of the rule of mercy, there is no place for the appearance of other attributes in our world. So what is the attribute of mercy? He's going to describe to us right now. But just like the perception of reality, everything is perceived from 2 opposite perspectives: day, night, bittersweet, ugly, beautiful. So we must have 2 opposite states in order to have any notion or any concept clarified and understood. So accordingly, it's not a wonder these are contradictory states in us, and it's also not a wonder that humanity is always going through, within our individual selves as well, going through contradictory states in life which we can't really understand, fathom, or even really reconcile. So most of our lives we're going through it with confusion and with lack of understanding of the things we're going through. Thus we have a lot of depression, we have a lot of mental, half the society has mental issues and they're disturbed. Why? Because we don't know what's going on in our lives. So let's take a look at these 4 attributes as Baal Islam defines them and try to understand what he's trying to give us here. What is the attribute of mercy? Our sages defined it: what's mine is yours, and what's yours is yours. And if all the people in the world were to behave by this quality, it would cancel all the glory of the attribute of truth and judgment, Because if each and every one were naturally willing to give everything he had to others and take nothing from another, then the whole interest in lying to and falsehood, in lying to one another would disappear. Also, it would be irrelevant to discuss the quality of truth, since truth and falsehood are relative to one another. If there were no falsehood in the world, there would be no concept of truth. Needless to say, all the other attributes which came only to strengthen the attribute of truth because of its weakness would be cancelled. So let's take a look at this again. This is a really interesting attribute because it's really illogical for us to understand. What is the attribute of mercy? Our sages defined it as. So it's obviously talking about Kabbalists who defined mercy as what's mine is yours and what's yours is also yours. So imagine what mercy is. Everything I have is yours, and what you have is also yours, and all of us need to think in that way to have the attribute of mercy. So who could possibly do that? Who could possibly even agree to that? And if all the people in the world, so I'm reading that paragraph again, and if all the people in the world were to behave by this quality, it would cancel all the glory of the attribute of truth and judgment, because if each and every one were naturally willing to give everything he had to others and take nothing from another, then the whole interest in lying to one another would disappear. So nobody would actually do any harm to anyone. Nobody would need to deceive anyone. Nobody would need to lie, steal. If we were all behaving in this way, nobody would actually be fighting with anyone. Also, it would be irrelevant to discuss the quality of truth, since truth and falsehood are relative to one another. So if there were no falsehood in the world, there would be no concept of truth. Needless to say, all the other attributes which came only to strengthen the attribute of truth because of its weakness would be cancelled. So this is what mercy is. And if we had mercy on the planet, everything would be cancelled out. Everything else would be cancelled out. So let's take a look at now truth. Truth is defined in the words, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. That contradicts the attribute of mercy and cannot altogether tolerate it. Since in truth it is unjust to labor and strain for another, because besides failing his friend and accustoming him to exploit others, truth dictates that every person should treasure his own assets for a time of need, so he will not have to be a burden on his fellow man. Moreover, there is not a person without relatives and heirs that in fact should come before others, because so nature dictates that he who gives his property to others lies to his relatives and natural heirs by not leaving them anything. And peace also contradicts justice. Well, before we move on to peace, let's read truth again. So truth is defined in the words, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. Now that seems rational to us, right? What I have is mine and what you have is yours. Okay, so it's a reasonable approach to life, and that's what normal modern society is saying. You go out, earn what you want to earn, make something out of your life, and whatever belongs to you is yours. I do the same, and whatever belongs to me is mine. So what's the big deal? Moreover, there is not a person without relatives and heirs that in fact should come before others, because so nature dictates that he who gives his property to others lies to his relatives and natural heirs by not leaving them anything. So, in this concept here, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, the whole world seems to be working in this way. And if I have anything and if I have heirs, I leave it down to them. So this chain continues. And peace, let's take a look at what peace is. And peace also contradicts justice, because to make peace in the public, there must be conditions that by content promise the nimble and the smart, which invest their energy and wisdom to become rich, and those who are negligent and naive to be poor. Hence, he who is more energetic takes his own share and the share of his negligent friend, and enjoys such a good life that there is not enough left for the negligent and naive to merely provide for their necessary livelihood. Hence they remain completely bare and destitute in many ways. So there you go. If I'm smart and fast, or let's say you're smart and fast, you're intelligent, you work hard, you run around, you get things done, you make a lot. Compared to someone who's not so smart, or he's not so, fast, quick, or is a bit lazy. Okay, by nature as well. We don't determine these things. A person can't determine to be hardworking, smart, or lazy, or whatever, because these things come to us by creation, by nature. So if somebody is a bit smarter, is a bit quick, then he's going to make a lot. And what he's then doing is reducing what the others should also be getting. So this is how the world is working. So you've got 1% of the world owning all the wealth, and the others are just fighting for the scraps. Okay, so this is the world situation right now. And this is why peace and justice don't really work out. So people are saying what's mine is mine and what's yours and yours is yours. So, and that seems like a fair deal. However, though, if you look at the whole of nature, nature doesn't create all of us smart and fast and cunning and so on. Nature creates us different. Smart people are less, the cunning people are less, the more egoists they are, they're less in society. So they make more, they make much more from the back of others. So the others don't get what they should be getting in order to have a decent life. So the masses are always ending up poor, miserable, don't have what they should be having. And you can't really relate that to justice, because nature doesn't give us justly the same attributes, the same abilities. So humanity has a problem in reconciling these things. What really is justice? So if somebody's smart, running around, making a lot of money, and if the rest of the population isn't, well, how's that going to be justice? How's that going to be just? Because there seems to be no justice from the side of creation, from the side of nature. So how can anybody really reconcile that? We can't. So some people, they make it, and they make a lot, while the rest of the population doesn't. And they're obviously having a really bad life. So this is a problem. And peace also contradicts justice, because to make peace in the public, there must be conditions that by content promise the nimble and the smart, which invest their energy and wisdom to become rich, and those who are negligent and naive to be poor. Hence, who is more energetic takes his own share and the share of his negligent friend as well, and enjoys such a good life that there is not enough left for the negligent and naive to merely provide for their necessary livelihood. Hence they remain completely bare and destitute in many ways. It is certainly unjust to punish the negligent and the naive so harshly for no evil. For what is their sin and what is the crime of those wretched people? If Providence did not grant them the agility and acumen, that they should be punished with torments harsher than death. Therefore there is no justice whatsoever in the conditions of peace. Peace contradicts justice, and justice contradicts peace. Because if we order the division of property justly, meaning give to the negligent and naive a substantial portion of the part that the nimble and the energetic have, then these powerful and initiating people will certainly not rest until they overthrow the government that enslaves the great ones, the energetic ones, and exploits them in favor of the weak. Therefore there is no hope for the peace of the collective, thus justice contradicts peace. So there you go, this is why society never gets a rest. Let's read this part again. It's really important for us to understand why there's societal uprising. When we need to understand why society gets into a conflict, and this is explaining exactly why. Because we're not created equal by nature, so this conflict has to happen, because the smarter, hard-working ones, they take all, and the rest take the scraps. Let's read that last paragraph again. Therefore there is no justice whatsoever in the conditions of peace. Peace contradicts justice, and justice contradicts peace, because if we order the division of property justly, so if we were to, in society, give property to everybody justly, meaning give to the negligent and the naive a substantial portion of the part that the nimble and the energetic have, then these powerful and initiating people will certainly not rest until they overthrow the government that enslaves the great ones, the energetic ones, and exploits them in favor of the weak. Therefore there is no hope for the peace of the collective, thus justice contradicts peace. So if we were to go for a more just society, the rich and the powerful wouldn't stand for it. And if we go too extreme towards in favor of the rich, then the masses, which are the poor, they're not going to settle for it. So they're going to have an uprising. So they're going to start uprising. They're going to start an uprising in order to throw the current government. And if the current government takes it to the other side, the rich and the powerful, they won't rest until they overthrow this government and bring a new government with someone that favors them. This is how things work out in day-to-day life as well. In many countries you'll see this happening, especially in countries that go through revolutions a lot, or dictatorships. So this is why humanity can never have a peace of mind, because all these attributes that we really crave for, that we really want to have, we can't have. Because all of these are contradictory. So we can't really settle them. And they're contradictory to our nature as well. So according to the definition of mercy, who would want to be merciful? None of us would want to be merciful. So we can never have truth, peace, or justice, simply because our nature does not allow that to happen. So let's take a look at what else we have here. The next subtitle is The Attribute of Singularity in the Egoism Affects Ruin and Destruction. Up to here, do we have any questions? We have. Francesco is asking, he's got 2 questions. In the article from the book Kabbalah for the Student, what page? Ooh, that's a good question. Because I'm reading from the internet. You have to check it out. Let me see what I've got. Kabbalah for the Student, Peace in the World article. The piece is 261. I think you're going to have to get this one from the internet. Yeah, it looks like you'll have to get this from the internet, because this one doesn't have peace in the world, it's got the peace. But the link should be on, they can give you the link. Can you pass the link on for the article? You don't have the link? Okay. So you can find it on the website kabbalah.info, and let me just put it up on the chat. So I just put it up on the chat. If you can pass it on, great. If you can't, then you'll just have to look it up on the internet, but it's on the website, so you can get this, no problem. It's under the articles Bala Sulam. And the question is, oh, apparently YouTube doesn't allow us to share the link. Okay, so you can find it though on Kabbalah.info under content. So Mutlu, why do I have problems balancing corporeal concept with spiritual ones? Doesn't Kabbalah speak only about inner states? Yet the article speaks of corporeal actions and behaviors. That's right. That's a really good one. This is why I did the introduction, because we study the wisdom of Kabbalah. So all of a sudden, it's a little weird for Baal Islam to start talking about society, humanity, and how we need to arrange our corporeal life. I mean, what for? Why do we need to do that? What's a Kabbalist have to do with that? Okay. So this is a good question. And so it has a long answer, because we need to look at it from a global perspective. Now, in the wisdom of Kabbalah, the Kabbalists are saying humanity, the whole of humanity, has to come to a higher level of consciousness. They're saying it's about everybody. And the only way to do that is through society. So what Kabbalists are trying to do is to actually push humanity through educating them, through trying to show them, why society needs to be organized in such a way so that they could jump to the next level, and why the society needs to be organized in such a way. Now think about it, it's quite logical, because we study the wisdom of Kabbalah, and what do? The minute we start studying the wisdom of Kabbalah, we arrange for ourselves a framework. We have a study framework, we have a group, we have our daily morning lessons, we've got afternoon lessons, we have connections with the group, and so on. So the minute we start studying the wisdom of Kabbalah, we're already integrating ourselves into this system where we're building for ourselves a society. Actually, that's what we're doing in the wisdom of Kabbalah. So the Kabbalists are saying, well, that's great if you're studying the wisdom of Kabbalah, but what about the 7 billion other people on the planet who also need to come to a higher level of consciousness? Well, we could always tell ourselves, well, if they want to come and study, great. If they don't, well, what can you do, right? So the Kabbalists don't say what can you do. They say I should do something. All right. So this is why Kabbalists are always caring for the whole of humanity. So Kabbalists can't really say, well, I don't care. They don't want to develop. So if they don't want to develop, they want to remain here as beasts or wild animals, they can, and they'll just end up dead. So what do we care? Well, unfortunately, a Kabbalist doesn't look at it that way. We sometimes wish they had, because, it's a burden on us as well. But if you think about it in a greater perspective, Kabbalists are really pushing forces of development in our lives. So they're really trying to push humanity to the next level so that humanity doesn't go through all the suffering it did previously. And the reason they want to do that is for the benefit of everyone. It's good for everyone. It's good for us too, for those who study the wisdom of Kabbalah. I'll tell you why. Because the more we invest in also helping others, what happens is we also develop ourselves. Because a student of Kabbalah, the only way he can attain the Creator is actually by becoming a channel. And that's the only way to go. So a student of Kabbalah also needs to help others so he can be like the Creator, bestow like the Creator. That attribute of bestowal starts working and initiating a change inside the student. So by actually helping the rest of humanity, a Kabbalist can really excel himself, and a student of Kabbalah can also reach spirituality by helping others. So initially it looks, like I said in the introduction, initially it looks like, well, why do we care? We study the wisdom of Kabbalah, want to get spiritual, so let's get spiritual and forget the rest of the planet. If they ever want to get spiritual, they can come study and do it. What do we care? Well, a Kabbalist has to care. And that is what makes him like the Creator. Because the Creator cares. Okay? And if we want to advance in spirituality, a Kabbalist also cares. So Baal Islam rightfully wants to also address everybody in the world with this article and saying, listen, all of us are on the same boat and we all have to make this transition together. So yeah. And also, just like we organize our corporeal life as students of Kabbalah, Baal Salam is also saying humanity, in order to reach the next level of their existence, the next higher degree of their consciousness, they also need to organize themselves as well. And who better knows that than a Kabbalist who has already attained the laws of nature, because they're trying to set everything up according to the laws of nature, not according to some mentality or some philosophy, or I don't know, some person like, you know, they try to do in Russia with communism according to Karl Marx or whatever, as if they understood Karl Marx. They set up communism in such a way they had no idea what Karl Marx was talking about. Because the first initiation of Karl Marx's theory is education. And without education, there is no way you can apply communism. And they tried to do it in a country like Russia, which was still in the Middle Ages when they tried to apply communism. It was still in the Middle Ages. Compared to Europe, it was way behind. So all of this takes us through a lot of turmoil. All these trial and errors in humanity take us through great suffering. So Kabbalist obviously wants to avoid that. He wants to bring something good to the whole of humanity, and this is why he's giving us all these explanations about corporeality. And it's good that he is, because it brings it down to a proper level of understanding why we also need to work like this in the group. So think about it. We could take this whole article and actually use it for our group as well. Because a student of Kabbalah, when he comes to study the wisdom of Kabbalah, he's not coming in, you know, at a spiritual level. He is in this world, he lives in his five senses, and he is, you know, in corporeality. So these articles also help a student of Kabbalah to also sort out his corporeal life and how to actually understand his corporeal life, how to understand how his country works, why it works in such a way. So I think these are really important things, not just for the public, but for us as well, for us to have this greater understanding of what kind of a world we're living in. Here's another question. Apparently they've shared the link, okay, on YouTube. So you can click on the link and follow the article there. Francesco is asking again, why is it so difficult to get emotionally deeper into Kabbalah? Well, emotionally deeper means I need to sense that upper reality, that spiritual state, or let's say, an upper reality means a spiritual state. So without confusing ourselves, let's understand that spirituality is this connection with the attributes of bestowal and love, which are the attributes of the Creator, which exist in nature. So nature and creator are the same thing in the wisdom of Kabbalah, simply because humanity needs to enter that phase of consciousness where it's really understanding how nature works and lives in accordance with the laws of nature that allow us to come to a high level of consciousness, which is to understand the thought of creation, the thought of the Creator. We become a created being that exists in the reality of that upper consciousness. So in order for us to emotionally get deeper into that, we need to develop those emotions. And these emotions can only be developed over time as we study, because just like children grow up and their emotions develop slowly and slowly and slowly as they grow up, then same with us in the wisdom of Kabbalah. So in order for us to get into a spiritual emotion and to really bring about an understanding to it, we need to, you know, make some effort, study, work, and then get into that state. And then we can actually discover how those emotions are much deeper than the emotions we go through in our corporeal lives. Because if you look at our corporeal lives, it's very shallow. You know, how many emotions can we really put our fingers onto? So it's very little. So in spirituality, it's a much wider spectrum of emotions, spectrum of sensations, which because of that higher level of consciousness, you have the ability to feel much more. So you're in these greatest sensations, you're in these greater, deeper understanding of everything because your sensations are deeper. This is why our world isn't really even discovered. You know, we say science discovered a lot, but if you think about it, if you look at the depth of reality, how much do we really know? You know, nothing. So, and we can't really know until we tread on, get into those sensations at an emotional level. So growing up takes time. It takes persistence and consistency in the study. So we have to, just like kids grow up, you know, imagine it takes 20, 30 years for a person to grow up, become an adult, and to actually manage his or her own life properly, even sometimes longer. So we have to understand that this is how it is in nature. All right, so let's move forward a bit more. The attribute of singularity in the egoism affects ruin and destruction. Okay? So the attribute of singularity in egoism affects ruin and destruction. Thus you see how our attributes collide and fight one another, and not only between sects but within each person. The four attributes dominate him all at once or one at a time and fight within him until it is impossible for common sense to organize them and bring them to complete consent. So this is why we have a lot of personal dramas in life. We just don't understand how we should do things and what we should do in the first place. So what to do and how to do is always a problem, not just for the individual, but for the society as well, because the individual and the society are the same thing really. So if a bunch of us have this problem reconciling all these things inside of us, the whole society has a problem doing it. The truth is that the root of this whole disorder within us is no more than the above mentioned attribute of singularity, which exists within each of us, whether more or less. And although we have clarified that it comes from a sublime reason, that this attribute extends to us directly from the Creator, who is single in the world and the root of all creations, still out of the sensation of singularity. When it sits within our narrow egoism, it affects ruin and destruction until it became the source of all the ruin that were and will be in the world. So on the one hand, our singularity comes from the Creator, because the Creator is single, He is one, is this one force governing the whole of reality. But on the other hand, when that singularity is embedded in our egoistic nature, the only thing it does is harm. And indeed, there is not a single person in the world who's free from it. And all the differences are only in the way it's used. For the desires of the heart, for ruling or for honor, and this is what separates people from one another. So the desires of the heart, when we want to accomplish our desires, we use singularity and we clothe it with the egoism without lack of any choice, because we've got no choice. We're egoistic by nature. So due to lack of any choice, our singularity is combined with egoism, and when we run after our desires and we want to get them done, we logically tread on other people. But the equal side in all the people in the world is that each of us stands ready to abuse and exploit all the people for his own private benefit with every means possible, without taking into any consideration that he is going to build himself on the ruin of his friend. And it is inconsequential what allowance each of us gives himself according to his chosen direction, since the desire is the root of the mind and not the mind the root of desire. In truth, the greater and more outstanding the person, precisely so is his attribute of singularity greater and outstanding. So the greater a person's desires are, his singularity is more powerful, and when that's clothed in egoism, he's obviously going to be on top of everybody else, and he's going to be, he's going to attain what he wants, all the success, what kind of success or dream he has, and it's going to be on the expense of everybody else. You can see this in business, you can see it in politics, you can see it in our simple lives as well. When we want to achieve something, we're often, doing it at the expense of others, and it depends on how strong our desire is. Because the stronger your desire is to attain something, then your mind is functioning towards that. It's constantly focused, thinking towards it, and what it does is just constantly work and strive to get what you want, and that doesn't take anybody else in the world into consideration. So at the end of the day, you're running for what you want without thinking about what happens to others, or whether how much you're taking from others. Let's carry on with the next subtitle, and this is called Using the Nature of Singularity as a Subject of Evolution in the Collective and the Individual. Now remember, the collective and the individual are the same, because if our nature is the same, the whole of the collective, consists of the individuals. So the individuals make up society, and the individual and the collective are the same, so our natures are the same. So this is a vicious circle. It's a cycle that we're constantly going through. Now we shall penetrate into the understanding of the direct conditions that will finally be accepted by humanity at the time of the appearance of world peace, and learn how its conditions are good to bring a life of happiness to the individual and to the collective, and the willingness in humanity to want to finally burden themselves with those special conditions. So now he's going to tell us what conditions we need in order to come to that sublime goal, the subject of evolution. Let us return to the matter of singularity in the heart of every person, which stands to swallow the whole wide world for his own pleasures. Its root extends directly from the unique one to the people, which are his branches. So we are all the Creator's branches. Here there's a question that demands an answer. How can it be that such a corrupted form will appear in us so as to become the father of all harm and ruin in the world? And how from the source of every construction extend the source of every destruction? We cannot leave such a question unanswered. So it's very important for us to understand. On the one hand, we as humanity are really good constructors of things. On the other hand, we destroy everything we constructed. So it's crazy. Indeed, there are two sides to the coin of the above mentioned singularity. If we examine it from its upper side, from the side of its equivalence with the unique one, which is the Creator, it works only in the form of bestowal upon others, for the Creator is all bestowal and has nothing of the form of reception, because he lacks nothing and needs to receive nothing from the creatures he has created. Therefore, the singularity that extends to us from him must also act only in forms of bestowal to others and to receive nothing for ourselves. So if we want to understand how this thing's going to work out, we have to understand the Creator's attributes, and we need to adapt ourselves to him. On the other side of that coin, so on the one hand we have to be like him, singularity, where we use this singularity, this individuality, in order to bestow and not to take anything for ourselves. Well, on the one hand, that's fine. Well, it doesn't sound fine, but on the one hand he explains that that stems from the Creator, so that's how it is inside of us. But on the other hand, on the other side of that coin, meaning how it actually works in us, we find that it operates in the complete opposite direction, because it operates only in forms of reception for oneself, such as a desire to be the only great and rich man in the whole world. Thus the above two sides are as far apart from one another as the east from the west. So our individuality that we're using It's completely for the wrong purpose. We're misusing that attribute we got from the Creator. That gives us the solution to our question. How is it possible that within the same singularity, which stems and comes to us from He who is unique in the world, who is the source of every construction, serves in us as the source of every destruction? So this is a wonder. How come I can construct and create everything and on the other hand wreck everything? This has come to us because we use that precious tool in the opposite direction, which is self-reception. And I'm not saying that the singularity in us will never act in us in a form of bestowal, because you cannot deny that amongst us are people whose singularity operates in them in the form of bestowal upon others. Others too, such as those who spend all their money for the common good, and those who dedicate all their efforts to the common good, etc. But those two sides of the coin that I have described speak only of the 2 points of the development of creation, which brings everything to completion, starting in absence and gradually climbing the degrees of development, from one degree to the next higher up, and from there to the highest still until it comes to the summit, which is its preordained measure of perfection, and there it will remain forever. So we need this contradiction, because through this construction and destruction, we're actually developing. Okay, it may not sound like a great development, but it actually works in us. These two contradictory states work in us to develop us. In order of development of those 2 points is A, the starting point, the lowest degree, which is close to complete absence, and it is described as the second side of the coin, and B, the summit, where it rests and exists forever, and that is described in the first side of the coin. So we have to be on the one hand we have to hit the lowest point, and from that lowest point we can then start to rise to the highest peak that we're supposed to get to. So this historical phases that we've gone through as humanity, these historical experiences of humanity, everything that we went through, the wars, the construction, the destruction, everything that we've really done was in order to bring us to this lowest point, which we can actually feel in the 21st century. I mean, we've come up with so many things, but we're still not happy with life. So we're still wondering why we're living, what's the purpose of life, what's the meaning of life. And this is why the whole society is crumbling, the whole world is crumbling, and this is actually the lowest point. So from this point onwards, humanity must take the reins of development into its own hands and start developing voluntarily. But this era that we're in has already developed to a great extent and has already risen many degrees. It has already risen above its lowest phase, which is the above mentioned second side, and has come significantly closer to the first side. Therefore, there are already people among us who use the singularity in forms of bestowal upon others. So in humanity, he's already saying that there are developed people who hit rock bottom and have excelled and reached peak levels where they're using their singularity in order to bestow. So humanity is already integrated with this bestowal. This is why the wisdom of Kabbalah, since the days of Adam, since Adam, the wisdom of Kabbalah has been developing. So throughout this historical phase as well, we're also going now really hand to hand with bestowal as well. So on the one hand, humanity is developing egoistically, but on the other hand, there is this attribute of spirituality that we're striving towards, developing with it. So when humanity comes to this rock bottom phase, this spirituality can now start pushing it up and up to help its development to get to that peak level. Because humanity, there's an objective to life, there's a purpose to life, and humanity needs to attain that purpose. So the reason we're going through all these turmoils is to bring humanity to the question that why are we going through all these things? What's the meaning and the purpose behind everything that's, that we're going through, because it's squeezing us, it's really pinching us. So this is why spirituality always had to develop as well next to humanity. So during historical periods as well, there are many Kabbalists throughout the centuries. But there are still few, as we are still in the midst of the path of development. When we come to the highest point of the degrees, we will all be using our singularity only in a form of bestowal upon others, and there will never be any case of any person using it in a form of self-reception. Obviously that phase is when the whole of humanity gets there. Until then, there are Kabbalists who are using their attributes to bestow in order to push humanity to get there. But when we all get there, we'll all be in the state of bestowal. By those words, we find the opportunity to examine the conditions of life in the last generation. Now he's talking about how the last generation of humanity should live. The time of world peace, when the whole of humanity achieves the level of the first side, which is highest level of spirituality, and will use their singularity only in the form of bestowal upon others, and not at all in the form of reception for self. And it is good to copy here the above mentioned form of life, so it will serve to us as a lesson and as a role model to settle our minds under the flood of the waves of our lives. Perhaps it is worthwhile and possible in our generation too to experiment in resembling this above form of life. So Baal Islam is actually inviting humanity to test this, and this is actually what we do in the groups as well. So if we're studying the wisdom of Kabbalah, what we want to do is practice this in the group. So on the one hand, yeah, it's talking about corporeality, but on the other hand, for those who want to get there voluntarily and are studying to get there, who are striving to get there, should start resembling this form of life. We should start working with it, experimenting with it. The next subtitle is the condition of life in the last generation. So this is how we should be living in the last generation. First, everyone must thoroughly understand and explain to his surrounding that the well-being of society, which is the well-being of the state, and the well-being of the world are completely interdependent. So this we need to understand. Everybody's well-being is important for the well-being of myself. For the well-being of the individual to occur, the whole world needs to have a good day. If I'm going to have a good day, the whole world needs to have a good day. If there's a war somewhere, it affects us all. If there's I don't know, if there's some Holocaust somewhere, if there's I don't know, if there's anything that's bad anywhere on the planet, it affects everybody. So there's war somewhere, migration of people affect everybody else. There's a natural disaster somewhere, it impacts us all. So the whole world is having an impact on the individual's life. So my life and the life of everybody in the world are the same thing. These two things are the same. As long as the laws of society are not satisfactory to each and every individual in the state, and leave a minority that is unsatisfied with the government of the state, this minority conspires under the government of the state and seeks to overthrow it. So the government needs to satisfy everyone. How's that going to happen? Good question. But obviously there must be a way to do it. And if its power is not sufficient to fight the government of the state face to face, it will want to overthrow it indirectly, such as to incite countries against each other and bring them to war, because it is natural that at wartime there will be a lot more unsatisfied people with which they will have hope of achieving the critical mass to overthrow the government of the state and establish a new leadership that is convenient for them. Thus, peace of the individual is a direct cause for peace of the states. Furthermore, if we take into consideration that part in the state whose craftsmanship is war, which the state always has, and their very hope for success, such as the scholars of war and those who live by supplying the ammunition, that as far as the social quality is concerned, they are always a very significant minority. And if we add them to the unsatisfied minority from the current rules, at every given moment you have a vast amount of people who crave war and bloodshed. So this is why wars never stop. We're constantly in war, in society, in the world, everywhere. Civil wars, wars between countries, social unrest all the time. And this is why. Because there's always a minority who's profiting from it, and there's always a minority who's not content with the government, and so on. Thus, peace of the world and peace of the state are interdependent. Hence, we necessarily find that even that part of the state which is currently satisfied with its life, which are the nimble and the clever, still have a lot to be concerned about for the safety of their lives, due to the tensions with those who strive to overthrow them. And if they understood the value of peace, they would be happy to adopt the conduct of living the last generation. For all that a man has will he give for his life. So there we go. Until we understand that peace and a good life depends on the well-being of everyone, we're never going to have peace. So humanity needs to educate itself towards this concept. And the only tool we have is actually education. There's nothing else we can give to humanity except education. Saying, listen, this is human nature and these are the laws of nature. And if we don't reconcile them, if we don't adapt to them, if we don't change ourselves and become a more developed person, we're never going to have peace. We're never going to have a good life either. And life is actually showing that to us. Pain versus pleasure in self-reception. Thus we examine and thoroughly grasp the above plan, we will see that the whole difficulty lies in changing our nature from a desire to receive for ourselves to a desire to bestow upon others, since those two things deny one another. At first glance, the plan seems imaginary, as something that is above human nature. But when we delve deeply into it, we will find that the contradiction from reception for oneself to bestowal upon others is nothing but a psychological matter. Because in fact, we do bestow upon others without benefiting ourselves. This is so because although self-reception manifests itself in us in various ways, such as property, possessions for pleasure of the heart, the eye, the palate, etc., all those are defined by one name, pleasure. Thus, the very essence of reception for oneself that a person desires is nothing but the desire for pleasure. And now imagine that if we were to collect all the pleasures one feels during his 70 years of life and put it on one side, private calculation, as when one works for oneself. But in a global calculation, the individual produces more than he takes for his own pleasure and sustenance. Thus, if the direction were to change from self-reception to bestowal, the individual will enjoy the entire produce he produces without much pain. So as you can see, there's only one simple thing that humanity needs to do, just change the way we look at things. Because at the end of the day, we strive to be happy. This is what our nature demands from us. We want to have a happy life, a good happy life. And happy life means me being happy. It doesn't necessarily come from all the corporeal things that I get. At the end of the day, there are things that make us happy, which we can actually live with. And those things, if you think about it, are never in materialism. Because if you were to check with yourself today, right now, when was the last time I was happy? You would most likely than not remember a time when you had a good time with your friends, family, when you had a good time with your kids or your spouse or whatever. The most important thing we need to understand here is that we are desired to get pleasure. And if we understood that ongoing pleasure is in good connection with people, then all the material things that we're really producing, we wouldn't mind taking what we need and giving the rest to others. Because those social connections are actually the happiness that we get in life. And if you think about it, it's also true for our materialism. Why are we so materialistic? We actually want to get materialistic in order for us to have more social connections, more social recognition. Everything actually we do is towards connecting with others. The problem is we do it from our singularity, like he explained above, which is clothed in our egoism. So we still want to connect with others, but it's in an egoistic way. We want to be on top of others. If we just considered that psychological shift for a moment and took the perspective that pleasure and happiness is the same thing, and I could have an unlimited amount of pleasure if I had loved ones around me, if I had a good connection with the people around me, then those pleasures and happiness would never actually end. Whereas in materialism, pleasures will always end. Because whenever I buy something materialistic, the pleasure always evaporates. It just goes away. This is why people have to constantly feed themselves with materialism in order for that pleasure to carry on. But it's impossible to live that way. So he's trying to explain to us here that the pleasure in reception is just a sorrowful life. It doesn't bring us anything, and we just end up dead trying to chase a bunch of things that never bring us happiness in the first place. So in order to be happy, we just need to go through this psychological change and understand that we are a machine. We're like a machine who wants to feel pleasure, and that pleasure can be felt with good connection with people. So if we started to make our calculation in that direction, rather than try to run after a bunch of stupid things in life, then we'd have a much happier life. So this grindstone, the way we're living right now, is really, putting us into the grinder. But this grinding actually makes us also more conscious, because pain starts to bring about consciousness to a person, which we're also going to experience with the coronavirus. As this virus really settles down in society, it's not over. People want to go back to their previous lifestyles. Nobody's going back anywhere. That's over. And soon, over the next several years, we'll see capitalism completely, crumbling, and humanity will need to set up a new economic, new social structure. They're going to have to do that. So this whole new phase is now changing, and as pain and suffering starts to be felt in society, society will need to, by the increase of consciousness, will feel a need to change their approach to life. This is how it's going to happen. And let's see if we have any questions. Okay. We've got another question from Francesco here. It sounds a lot like the left and right line, correct? That's right. We're always going through from one to the other, and we're just not balancing it out. And because we're not balancing it out, we're going through a bunch of turmoil. So humanity is always from one extreme to the other, right, left, right, left. You can see it in politics as well. So a part of society between this right and left is always going to be unhappy. You're not going to be content with what's going on, and because of that, there's always going to be conflict. So there's never peace in society. So until humanity understands that we need to change our nature, we need to change the way we live in order to have peace, this is always going to be swaying from one side to the other. P. Green is asking, how do you write and say faith above reason in Hebrew? Lamala miadat. It's faith above reason. Emunah is faith. Lamala miadat is above reason. Faith above reason. In Hebrew, we'll have to fix that up for you. Since we don't have any questions, let's do that for P. Green. Let me get that for you. I don't have a Hebrew keyboard here, but we can definitely do that for you. I'll copy and paste it here onto the chat box, and Kurt or one of the guys can actually put it onto, okay, onto YouTube. Let's see if I can manage to do it. There we go. I just copied and pasted. They can put that up on YouTube for you. Okay. Emunah lemala miadat. Faith above reason. All right. Now, dear friends, we've managed to finish this article, and it was a long one, but we're going to get through these articles of Baal HaSulam and Rabash over these Tuesdays, and hopefully we'll cover them at those main concepts. These will also help us understand how to look at our lives properly, and how to actually explain life to ourselves and to those who want to hear about it, to our loved ones, to our children. At the end of the day, we have to teach how life works to our children as well. So these are very important for students of Kabbalah who want to explain to their children about life, why life is like this, why our nature is like this, why it's contradictory to the laws of nature, how we can reconcile them, how we can have peace in society, how can I change myself, how can I change the way I use my attributes from an egoistic perspective to a bestowing perspective, or from a bestowing aspect. So all these things we also have to learn to provide for our children the correct approach to life, because we'll see in life that egoism is pretty much over, and because life is selective and it likes to choose the survivor is going to be those who are going to be those who have adapted to the laws of nature. So the strong that will survive in the future are those who can live according to the laws of nature. So if humanity doesn't learn how to live according to the laws of bestowal, then accordingly it will have to go through more sufferings. So hopefully we won't go through that. We'll also try to explain to humanity why it needs to change as well in order not to go through that suffering. And we'll see how we move forward. So next week we'll have a new article. We're going to carry on with Baal HaSulam articles again, and you'll probably get it in an email. And until next Tuesday, take care, all the best. Have a great evening or have a great day, depending where you are. All the best now. Bye bye.